Journey through the church here, we have these sort of what we think of as high holy days where we pull out all the stops and add extra stuff into worship. Sometimes maybe a procession, depending on different congregations, might have incense and more robes and all kinds of fancy stuff. If we think about high holy days in the church here, what are some examples? Easter, right? On Easter we get flowers all up here, we process in, Palm Sunday is another one, right? We have big arches of palms, Christmas. Well, today is not a high holy day for the church. It is a high holy day for our culture. What day is it? It's the Super Bowl. When I was in class a few weeks ago, we talked about how much football kind of is a religion in our culture. And it has all of the things that we have when you think about rituals and all of the stuff of a religion, right? So we come to a sanctuary. At the Super Bowl, they'll go to the stadium. There's sort of things that happen every week that we are here, words that we say. This week, the teams came in from their respective towns to where the Super Bowl is, and they had Media Day. And they always ask the same questions, right? And they have the same sorts of answers. And they go through this ritual of Media Day. The teams go through their practice and their preparation. There's music at the Super Bowl. There's sung songs that we sing every time. The people will all gather in the crowd. On Sundays, we gather. We have special food on Sundays. Super Bowl has special food, right? We don't bake turkeys and the things we do on Thanksgiving, Christmas. We have chicken wings and, all kinds of other Super Bowl food. So it has all of this together. Now imagine that today, after all of this lead up, whether you care about the football game or not, we were to get there, the stadium was full, and instead of the team coming running out of the two different ends to play, if they just didn't play the game. Would there be any Super Bowl commercials if they didn't play the game? Would you all be gathering and making food and doing the things for the Super Bowl if there was a game?
No.
No, right? The game is the main thing, and all of that ritual that surrounds it is just the stuff that gets you to the game so they can figure out who the best team is. If you remember the arc of the narrative of the Old Testament, you get from Abraham, who is blessed to be a blessing. He's not just blessed, he's blessed for a reason, and that reason is to be a blessing. So Abraham is blessed to be a blessing, and that carries on, and eventually the people of Israel, they get freed from slavery in Egypt. They go out into the wilderness, and God gives them the law, these 10 commandments, and those commandments are meant to be a blessing, and they are then to go and bless the world as God's holy people. Well, they go along and they take all the rituals and stuff that come along with that law and the sacrifices and all the things they're supposed to do. Eventually they get carried off into exile in Babylon. They get sent back from Babylon, and when we encounter the prophet Isaiah today, the people are already back and they're still fasting and doing the things of the religion, right? They're sacrificing, they're doing all this stuff. But the prophet has a word from the Lord, and it's a harsh word. If you listen at the beginning, God said, shout it loudly so they can hear it. And what the prophet says is, you're doing all of the fasting, except for you're neglecting the poor people and you're oppressing the people that work for you. And the text comes around at the end, and towards the end it says, here's the fast that's acceptable to God. It is to free the oppressed. It is to feed hungry people with food. It is not just to feed homeless people, but to welcome them into your home. It is to stand with the people that are captive. It's this long list of things that ought to sound a lot like what we hear at the end of Matthew, when Jesus says, whatever you did for the least of these, right? If you fed somebody, clothed somebody, gave somebody something to drink, visited somebody in prison and helped free the captive, if you did any of those things, you did them for Jesus. Same stuff here in Isaiah. Problem is they're not doing these things. And so God is saying, this is what would be acceptable fasting. Don't just not eat and then be nasty to your neighbor. What you should be doing with your fasting is really going out and bringing justice to the world. And what we're hearing in the prophet is that they are doing all of the religious stuff. They're doing all of the things that are meant to shape them as God's people and prepare them to go out and do justice, but they are not playing the game. I wonder, as a church, and not just this congregation, but as the church, how are we doing at playing the game of justice and caring for our neighbor and bringing love and grace into the world? We gather every Sunday in this place and we sing and we pray. We have midweek things where we can gather. We have prayer books you can take with you. We have all sorts of things of faithfulness. Digging into Scripture and prayer practices and communion and baptism. We have all of this religious rites and rituals. And I think those things are important. because I think that's where God shapes us, and we begin to take on the dreams of God and the hopes that God has for the world, and we begin to hear the promises of God and take them out into the world with us. When we gather at this table and we invite everybody to the table, that's shaping us to understand what God's vision for the whole world looks like, and we take that out. But if we don't take that out, right, we've done all of the pregame, and we don't get to the game. We don't play that game on the field. Now, in some ways, if you were to ask our culture if the church is playing the game, what would the culture say? The culture would just say no, right? The churches aren't shrinking because people are so enamored with what the church is doing that they want to show up and be a part of it. So, largely our culture would say we are not playing the game. We are not bringing love and grace and justice in the world and feeding hungry people and taking care of poor people. We're not getting it done. And in some ways, I think that criticism that the church gets for being hypocritical and some of the other things is unfair, because I know what some of you do in your day-to-day lives. That is the very stuff of shining light into the world and being faithful. But collectively, we probably aren't getting it done and playing the game as much as we ought. And some of that's just from busyness. You get up every day and you got things to do, and whether it's school or whether it's work or whether you've got stuff you got going on in retirement, just getting from day to day sometimes is enough that we could do, let alone find the time to go feed some hungry people and visit some people in prison and help some people that are being oppressed not be oppressed anymore. So busyness is part of it. I think fear is part of it. To go stand with people that are really struggling is a scary place to go sometimes, because some of them have serious, deep, dark issues. Some of those places are scary places where there's violence, and fear can make us just kind of sit back and say, you know, that's probably someone else's job, not quite mine, because I don't have that today. And then there's just the comfort that we have. I mean, it's easy to just fall into our routines, whether we're busy or not, whether we're afraid or not, and not necessarily get pushed out into the world to do the love and to do the care and the things that God calls us to do. And so if you think about whether or not the church is getting it done, whether we're playing the game or we're just showing up and doing all of the pregame rituals, I would suggest that most of the time we're probably collectively not getting it done. I heard an interview this week with a sports guy talking about the Super Bowl. And he talked about the NFL's ratings being down. And one of the reasons the ratings are down is, he suggested, is because there's so much going on in our world right now that tuning into a football game doesn't quite seem as important as it used to be. And so he talked about the Patriots and he talked about the Falcons, and he said, the question will be, when it comes to ratings, can the Super Bowl break through the noise and get some attention this year? And I liked that idea of breaking through. And if you listen to the passage from Isaiah, Isaiah uses those same words. Break forth, not break through. Isaiah says when you give these fasts, when you bring justice, when you do all of these things God is talking about, then your light will break through like the dawn. Now, I always thought of dawn as kind of light that creeps up and slowly fills the sky, but that's not what Isaiah says. Isaiah says your light will break forth like the dawn. Like it'll blow it out, and it'll be big, and it'll be noticeable. And as the text goes on, it talks about healing. It talks about streets being made whole and well. Isaiah is talking about God's vision and God's light coming into the world and bringing it into this new space. Now, these people of Israel had experienced oppression. They had experienced slavery. They had experienced their homes torn down and then carried off into a foreign place and then brought back. They know what death looks like. So when the prophet is talking about light breaking forth from the dawn, this is about life. And they can see that and say, that ought to be awesome. Now, when you hear Jesus in this text today say, let your light so shine before others, Jesus is also talking about light breaking forth. Now, the difference between, like, the Super Bowl, you have to earn a spot in the Super Bowl, right? You don't just, like, show up in the first of the season and they just pick a couple teams that play in the Super Bowl. You have to earn it. But God's grace doesn't work that way. Jesus went into the depths of darkness and death to come out into that light of resurrection on the other side, and that's just a gift to us. Our invitation to play in this game of justice and care for other people is not something we have to earn. It's a gift of life that we have already been given. So when Jesus talks about this light, letting our light shine, doing our good works and all the rest of that, it sounds a lot like what the prophet is saying. I've been going to church my whole life. I don't know how many times I've heard this story from Matthew, how many times I've heard. Every time we baptize a baby, we read it. And, every time we baptize anybody, we read it. This light so shining before others. And what I love about Scripture is that I continue to find new things there that I never saw before, no matter how many times I've heard the story. And this week I heard two things in this little bit. The first was, who gets a light and lights it in the house and puts it on her bushel basket? Nobody does, right? You put it on the light stand. So in that little stretch of this text, you kind of get a sense that each of us has a light that we can shine. And we can carry that light with us, or we can maybe try to hide it. One of my friends, a few years ago, she wrote a devotional for her. They had a congregational devotional, and she wrote a part for that. And in that, she reflected on her own depression that can be very deep and dark sometimes. And what she reflected on that depression was that she used to see it as a curse, and now she sees it as a blessing. Now, it's not that she sees being depressed as a blessing. It's not that she sees that darkness for her as a blessing. But she had recently had an opportunity to enter into someone else's depression with them because they did not know they had depression. They did not know the symptoms. They did not know their struggle. But she recognized it because she had been there. And so she went to this person and said, I have a feeling I know a little bit about where you are at. And because of that conversation, this person was able to get some hope and see some light and enter into a different journey of their own mental health. But only because she had been in that dark place herself, and had light shine into that space, and was now letting that light break forth like the dawn. And because she was willing to enter that journey with that other person, she was able to bring that light there. She could have hid it under the bushel. She could have kept away from that space, but that's not what she did. She was so moved by this light in her that she had to share it. So in this story, there is this sense that each of us has a light to share. And we are challenged to figure out where in our day-to-day life we share that. It might be with your neighbor right next door. It might be with your coworker. It could be anybody that has some darkness in their life. It might be depression. It might be the homeless person that's sitting outside. It could be anything that Jesus calls us to let that light shine through. But there's another part of this story that I had never noticed before. He says, a city on a hill cannot be what? Hidden. You can't hide it, right? The city on a hill's got light. You cannot hide that. How many people live in a city? A lot, not just one. So in this story, we have a light that's in a room that is kind of solitary, but it still shines forth. But then you got a city, and you cannot hide a city. I think what Jesus may be saying to us is that the church is full of light because it is the light of Jesus that shines in us, and you can't hide that. We can try to hide it, we can ignore it, but God's light is so bright it will shine forth. This past Monday, we got an invitation late in the afternoon from our Muslim brothers and sisters down the street to come join them in an interfaith prayer service. The prompting thing for this was them getting a lot of phone calls about the shooting at the mosque in Canada. And they said, well, maybe we should get together with our Jewish and Christian brothers and sisters and pray. So they invited us at, I don't know, I think I saw it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we posted it to the congregation as fast as we could. But that's, some of you probably didn't get the message till the next day, right? So I got there right about the time it was starting. There were 13 people from this congregation there. 13 of us all together. And we sat and we prayed, and the rabbi sang a beautiful prayer in Hebrew, and the imam prayed in Arabic, and they both said the same things in English. It was all about peace and about love, and we all gathered in that space. But there was 13 of us there, and you can't hide that. You cannot hide that we showed up, right? That light shines. And if you think about the ways that we go out into the world, we can go one at a time, and we do that because just by nature we scatter into what our day-to-day is. But we are also called together to go out into the world and be that light that shines through us. And it is not our light, but it is Jesus' light that will break forth from the dawn, like the dawn. It will break forth from us, and it will transform our community. As we finished up that prayer gathering, the news was there, and I have long had a policy of not wanting to be on the news. And when they asked me the question, I wanted to run away. But then I thought, well, if I'm going to be on the news, it ought to be for something like standing with the brothers and sisters who have fear in the world, which is much of what they expressed in those conversations and prayers that we had. And the person in the news said, what is it, that you're doing here, and why does this proximity matter? And I had to answer that question like right off the top of my head, right? So I said, well, our kids go to the same schools, right? We shop at the same grocery stores. We are neighbors. And all of our faith traditions call us to live differently in the world, different than hate, different than separation, but to bring love and to bring grace and to bring mercy. And when we gather and do that like we did, that changes things. It changes us, it changes the immediate community around us, and the more we do stuff like that, the more it begins to echo out and ripple out until the whole world begins to live in a different way because that light cannot be hid. It breaks forth from us like it breaks forth from the dawn. The Super Bowl will happen today. Whether or not people tune in, I don't really care, right? But as we are called out to be the church, may we be blessed to be that light that breaks forth. At the beginning of the football game, what do? They come running out of the tunnel. When we go out of this place, instead of meandering out and slowly getting about life, maybe we should break forth every Sunday, right? Come running out and say, here we go! And here comes the light of Jesus. Watch out, because it's going to be awesome. Amen.